Hi folks, Jennifer Nelson here with Pocket Hours. Pocket Hours is the only podcast made by realtors for realtors. Come listen as I interview high-producing brokers to hear their best practices. And don't forget that while you are listening, you are also earning clock hour credit. Tune in every other week to hear from someone new, and please remember to tell your broker friends about Pocket Hours so more folks can elevate their business. Be the agent you would hire. Looking forward to having you listen in. Hi folks, Jennifer Nelson here with Pocket Hours, and we had this crazy great idea to interview an appraiser here on the show. And so today I'm going to be talking to Andrew Gallaugher with Pacific Heritage Appraisals. And Andrew's been doing appraisal work for over 25 years. And I stumbled across him because he was an appraiser for a recent sale that I had. And he called me and asked me about some of the comps. And I thought, well, that's new. That's never happened to me before, or it's been a long time. And he seemed very approachable. He seemed like he cared about what he did and the value mattered, and he wanted to get it right. And so I started to chat with him at length and then said, would you be willing to just let me interview you? So you're going to hear some great news from Andrew about what appraisers are looking for from realtors, about how he does his approach, and just learn a lot about that end of our business that sometimes feels like we're out to manipulate them or dress up pretty or do all kinds of dances to try to get a value that we need to get. But instead, here's some really practical tips and some knowledge for you from Andrew. Here we go. Hey folks, this is Jennifer Nelson here with Pocket Hours, and I am so excited to be interviewing Andrew. Andrew was kind enough, he comes from Pacific Heritage Appraisal, and he was kind enough to give us his time today. Andrew, thanks for being on this call. We're so excited to learn from you. And we always, I think realtors always have this sort of intrigue about appraisals because, you know, you sort of make or break our world. And so we'd like to get some inside scoop from you. So thanks for being on the call today. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So Andrew, tell me a little bit, first of all, just who are you? Family, pets, what, you know, where do you live in Seattle or all that?
Yeah, I like that. It's a deep philosophical question right off the bat. Who am I?
That's right.
I live in Shoreline right now. I
Okay.
have a roommate and a cat.
Okay.
And my brothers, and I have two brothers, two sisters in the area.
Nice.
Actually, I have one that lives down in Texas.
Okay.
We call him Texas Mitch. And
All
then
right.
my other sisters live in Mill Creek and Renton.
Okay.
And my other brother lives in West Seattle. Both my parents are alive. They're in the area as well. So
excellent. Yeah. What's your cat's name?
Charlie.
Excellent. How long have you had Charlie?
I got her during the pandemic. She was a rescue. So I got her to Seattle Command. So.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. Yeah. Charlie. I love Charlie as a girl too. Rock on with that one.
She has hollow legs.
Okay. Okay. So before you got into doing appraisals, what was your vocation?
Man, I did a lot of different things. I was working restaurant, worked retail, groceries, going to school, and it was like in my mid-20s. It was actually my mom. She suggested I reach out to a friend of the family who started Pacific Heritage Appraisal, Eric Simmons, and he asked me to go on a ride along, see if I was interested. They just started the company like within that year.
Oh, wow.
There's like 4 owners at the time. They were at the time where they're going to start training some newbies. They want to take on 4 trainees. And I went on the ride along in Ballard. I was like, man, this is pretty cool. This is a pretty cool gig. I think I want to do this. And so that's kind of how it started.
That's cool. How long ago was that?
A long time ago. It was in late 90s, 97 or 98, somewhere in there.
Oh, my word. Look at that. So you've been doing this a long time.
Long time.
I like it. Oh, good. I'm so excited about that. That's good. Okay. And then what did you like about it? The question I was going to ask you is what drew you to appraisals, but like what stood out to you as you did that ride along?
It looked fun. The flexibility of the job. It was also going to be challenging. I could see. And I really liked being outdoors, part of the job. The other part's obviously sitting down and doing the writing process. And there was a lot to learn. Also, I got a chance to go in and meet the company. Eric brought me in. I went over. At the time, there was an office over in Bellevue. I was like, man, this is really cool. This is really, really what I want to do. And it intrigued me, And I was like, I was 26 or 27 at the time. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of it.
That's so cool. That's so cool. You hit on it a little bit, just that there's some challenges in this industry, but you've been doing it long enough that you've really seen the ups and downs. I mean, sort of like real estate in that way. When we're
Hmm.
slow, you're slow. So,
Right. Yeah.
what are some challenges over your 20 plus year career in appraisals that you've encountered?
The biggest challenge was the crash. That
Mm-hmm.
was probably the biggest one for sure. When I got
Mm-hmm.
into it, it was busy,
Mm-hmm.
and I know the guys when I got into it, they're like, it's not always like this,
Mm-hmm.
they've been doing it since the 80s and they're old, man. And
Exactly. We're not there. Yeah.
no, but they're like, no, it's always like this. It's you're gonna have
Mm,
ups and downs. It's
yeah.
real estate. And I was like, yeah, yeah, whatever, And so we were always busy, and then the crash, kind of started coming in,
Mm,
and
yeah.
things got really tough. And then those few years after that, with all the bank owned sales and the short sales, and learning how to appraise through that
Mm-hmm.
it was really hard,
Mm-hmm.
and
I
also
bet.
just not. I think they laid me off for a while, so I was jobless for a while, and then the market kind of finally came back on, and then it was about 2011, 2012 where it really started
Mm-hmm.
taking off again, which was great. Amazon was coming in with all of that, and then the
Mm-hmm.
tech industry too was pushing a lot of the home sales, along with a lot of other things too. But I just remember that was definitely a challenge, and now
Mm-hmm.
it's another challenge as well. Another challenge is the cyclical nature of the industry, or the real estate in Puget Sound, as you know. It's like
Mm-hmm.
once spring rolls around, you get people buying houses like crazy, and then you have this push of values, and then we have this as appraisers. We always trail the market. We got this old data from like September,
Mm-hmm.
October, November. It's like, well, man,
Mm-hmm.
these comps don't they don't really help. So
They don't really
how do we
help. Yeah.
appraise these properties? And so I think that's probably what you're going to lead us into in the next questions you have for me.
In preparation of this interview, I asked some realtor friends, other brokers in the industry, what do you want to hear from Andrew? What do you want to know about? And
Mm-hmm.
one of the questions that I thought was a great one was, let's just even take 2022 last year. At
Mm-hmm.
the beginning of the year, we had sub 3% interest rates. And it was nuts. I mean, homes were, as you remember, going for 100, 300, $500,000 over list price.
Absolutely
And
insane.
yeah. And then, you come toward the end of that year, end of last year, and we're more than double the interest rate that was being offered at the beginning of the year. So, talk about challenging for us as realtors to be able to say to someone, I know that what was happening in January or March of last year, and now you're trying to sell in October, November, right? And so you sort of think your home is worth what the neighbors got in February. But the
Right.
reality is, right, our market has shifted. But from an appraiser point of view, like, how did you go about balancing out that interest rate shift and the demand and those kind of high prices that people were willing to pay over list?
Good, really good question. First of all, like during that time of, a lot of the values being pushed up, it's kind of the same thing. I'll say right now, the best comps we can have
Mm-hmm.
of what's going on is the active and the pending sell market, and reaching
Mm-hmm.
out to you guys and getting the information from you as to what other offers you're receiving for our comps. You
Mm-hmm.
got these closed sales that can or cannot be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Just when the market was being, you had $200,000 and $300,000 over list.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be like, man, you get this order, and you're like, dude, and it's like, really. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember one of the first times I went in that, and I started calling other real estate agents. It's like, yeah, I got 14 offers for this one.
Mm-hmm.
It was bid up here. We got 12 offers for this one, and nine or whatever. And the market was doing that. So you're able to use that information from real estate agents to appraise properties. So that was really helpful. But in terms
Mm-hmm.
of like what's going on now is obviously the challenge is still have low inventory of homes. And really the market shifted literally, it was like almost overnight. If you
Yep.
could look back on market data, we put all the data in our reports, you
Mm-hmm.
could just see the values just
Mm-hmm.
drop off the
Mm-hmm.
table around June. It was still
Mm-hmm.
hot in that last year at this time, and then boom. And
Changed.
so
Yep.
yeah, it's changed dramatically. what I've seen too in some areas, not all areas, it's still going down in some areas. Some areas it dropped and it's kind of remained somewhat stable, definitely softening. And so when we're using current data, because a lot of requirements we got to face, I don't know if you guys know, a lot of lenders and underwriters, they got to have sales within the last 90 days.
Yeah,
so using old sales is just like, it's not good comps to use, and or got to use time adjustments and where you're really reflecting the current market. And then also other current listings and actives or pending sales to help support our values. And so that's it. Just
keeping up with that.
That's really, and having open lines of communication, obviously with you guys, because you guys are on the front lines, and it's usually we're a few weeks behind you guys always, right? Because of how long that takes to close. So
sure. One of the reasons why I asked you, Andrew, to be on this podcast is because of my experience with you. And after 20 plus years in the business, I've had my fair share of appraiser experiences and some that I don't care to remember and some that are okay. But I've
heard a lot of stories from
lots of realtors, have their stories about appraisers. But one of the things that stood out to me about how you practice, and you just mentioned it, is the say, your call to me that said, here's where I'm at. What else? What am I missing on an appraisal that you just had for a client of mine that was coming in low? And I appreciate
tough appraisal. It was a tough appraisal.
Tough appraisal for sure. Yeah, I mean, I thought, man, it was a tiny house amidst, $1 million homes. And anyway, lots of factors. But what I appreciated was just your ability to make that call and to say, here's what I have. What do you have? Let's talk about this. What am I missing? And that just makes you stand out, first of all, as an appraiser.
Awesome.
So thank you, and keep doing that. I'm sure you've been doing it for a long time, but this is the first time that I know that we've worked together. So, and being able to talk to us, and that leads me into my next question, is to say, I think sometimes realtors wonder how we can be helpful to you, or what other times if it's not helpful. And I know there's people that take different approaches. Some people show up all the time at appraisers, appointments, and, have on their best, show and kind of wanting to manipulate, I think, in some ways. And other people just stay away from it altogether. There's this continuum. So what's helpful for you?
Oh my God. I'm so glad you asked.
Okay.
So, I mean, just for us as appraisers, and I'll speak for myself, but I could probably speak for a lot of appraisers. It's like, we don't need you at the inspection, quite honestly. It's just easier. We just go in and do our thing, especially I love the vacant homes. We can get in there and get out. Yep. And then if you guys want to send us comps, we'll definitely take a look at those comps, and you can email it to us, or you can leave them on the counter or whatever. And let us know anything else with the process of how the transaction transpired. I do that. You have to do that when you're appraising and interview the agents, especially for difficult appraisals. There's some appraisals that's like you get to, it's like they're slam dunks, and it's like, okay, I don't need too much information. It's pretty straightforward. There's a lot of comparable sales. But when it gets dicey, or, it's hard. It's like you just got to get as much information as you can. And so that's what I was trained to do. These guys that took me on, that's where I learned it, is to turn out high quality appraisals and do it as fast as you can, and to get the process rolling. And that's the best way I've found to do it, because a lot of times you can do a lot of explaining in your appraisal. It's kind of, the report is it's very uniform and stuff like that, but there's places in the report to just go right in depth of what's going on and how and why you're coming up with that opinion of value. So
that's cool. Yeah. So sort of get out of your way. I mean, a little bit is to say you have 10 appraisals on your desk and you need to get into that house and do your own work.
I wish I had 10 appraisals on my desk right now.
Don't we all wish we had 10 appraisals to give you? Yes, for sure.
Back in the day, just like last year.
Just even last year. Exactly. So long ago, yeah. So don't show up. I love that. I don't show up to any of mine. And if we know that it's going to be a tricky appraisal just because of the circumstances, anything we can leave behind for you or email you would be helpful.
What's been great is recently, and I did this, it was just a few weeks ago, another appraisal, and the agent was like, hey, here's this one that's selling here. I know the agent, it's selling for this amount. They got this many offers, and they went down and they had not only did they have comps, but they had all this data information for me. It was like, oh, made it easy. So I could call the other agent and just say, hey, I understand what's going on with this comparable. And they're like, yeah. And they just kind of reiterated what they told me, and I can get I've had further questions for that agent. But yeah,
Okay.
and that's happened a few times lately. It's like you guys are on the spot and you're aware of like, okay, this is definitely a tough appraisal, and they tell me what's going on with that.
That's great.
Other
Okay.
comps that they were looking at.
Yeah. And why? And you were specifically just speaking about pending sales, that we have a relationship with the other agent that can say, here's what happened.
Right. Or other actual closed sales. They can tell me, hey, this is what this one has. I did one in Bainbridge Island. It was a month or so ago, and there was lots of comps. It wasn't an issue, but there was some right within the plot, and the agent was like, okay, here's this sale, and the floor plan is not as nice, or the kitchen, or what, I can't remember exactly, but they had some good intel as to why that one sold for where it was. And there's certain, just the way the transaction went down, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's like all that stuff's really helpful to know. And she did meet me out there because she had to let me in, so that was cool. And so there's that opportunity to tell me, get that information. But also emails and phone calls while I'm talking to you guys. And of course, we don't meet you guys out at the properties as much anymore. So that's one drawback, I guess. But just in terms of our job, it's super easy just to get in, do our thing. And then, well, I mean, for me, I just been trained just to talk to the agents and reach out to them and get further information if I have any issues, and also let you know where I'm at if I'm coming in low. It's just like, and then give you guys the opportunity to send me more stuff. And I think that one specifically that we did, you're talking about, you sent me this comp, and I was like, I didn't have that, and that helped out a lot because it sold, but kind of crazily too. It was bid way up, and it was just because of the neighborhood it was in, and so that was really helpful.
And one of the things that we talked about too, when you had called me, was that this particular sale that we keep referring to, that the seller had just put in a brand new sewer line. And these are things we can't see. And if the listing agent doesn't point them out, in the house, that's something that I know that you said, great to know. Let me mark that in the report to do. And it's not necessarily like that's how much that's worth. It's just these are the sort of upgrades that help you say in the report, this is how we came to that value. So that's cool.
Sure.
So this is a big question that came up, and it's one I have too, and that's to say there's a lot of kind of dense housing now. There's these DADUs, the detached accessory dwelling units, or the attached ADUs. So you come to a listing, right? It's handed to you as an appraiser. How in the world do you go about adding value, or how do you find value with those?
There's a couple things. There's one, like the new construction. Are you talking about more along those lines, and like in Seattle? Because what we're seeing is a lot of those are being sold separately. They condoize those sites. Those are easy. They're building so many now that there's lots of comps, right? Or enough to use. In the beginning, it was kind of hard when they first started kind of splitting those projects up, right? So, but I think you're talking more along you get to a house and it has an actual DADU. How do you value that DADU, or the legal apartment in the basement? Really good question. In the appraisal industry, I found there's this great way to doing it, because obviously what you really ultimately want to have is you got a property or a unit, and there's a sell price to that, and the differences, we can adjust those out, make adjustments for how the market responds to the differences. And for a DADU, there really isn't any separate sell for that. What's the contributor value for that feature? And so I know just what I've been doing, and this was, again, one of the owners of the company, he's retired since then, and this is how he did it, and he uses kind of an income approach to that. And so that's kind of what I've adopted to. And I have done at least a dozen or more with the DADU or the ADU, where it actually brings in an income. And there's a way I can figure that. You can figure out what rents are in a neighborhood. There's also a great website I found. It's called, I think it's Air DNA. You put all your factors in there of what the property is, and they estimate what it brings in a year.
Okay.
They got a net operating income and all that stuff. And so I kind of use that tool too to go, okay, because there's definitely different from a monthly income versus a daily, and how often they can rent that property out. Because really that's one of the features of the property, is it can bring in income.
Yep.
right? So, and the kind of issue you get into a lot is like if you have a mother-in-law, right? It's not an actual legal apartment in the basement.
Right.
It's either it's permitted or not permitted or whatever, but there's no, it gets down to the ingress egress if there's separate access to it, all that stuff. That's, I'm gonna get too nerdy on you, but anyway, so like that's how I do it. I've got a little
system.
Yeah, I got a system to do it. I estimate what it could bring in a year, monthly, and also if you Airbnb it.
It doesn't sound like necessarily that there's a big difference for appraisals between a dadu or just a whole unit that's been built out in the basement. Sort of the legalized piece of that isn't as important as like how much income does it bring in.
Well, you could do, I'm sure there's other appraisers that do it a lot different than I do. Maybe they use the cost approach. You can use regression in that, or different tools. Paired sales data is really hard because there's really not that much stuff out there. So that's just kind of what I've adopted. I've had zero revisions or other conditions to support that. So it's worked out pretty good for me.
Okay.
You know? So I don't know if other appraisers are doing that or not, but that's kind of how I handle it. And it actually, it makes a lot of sense too. I tested looking at my appraisals. I'm like, okay.
We've often wondered when we list homes that have pools, for example, indoor pool, outdoor pool, and or a 3-car garage or a 4-car garage or some of these sort of outlier things. What does that do for you as an appraiser? Like, in my opinion, from a listing side, pools usually take value away from, there's not too many people that want.
Are you specifically asking me about an in-ground pool versus a 4th-car garage? Because garages they're cool. I mean,
they're easy to find out.
Yeah, the more, if you have like a 6-car garage, there's also, the super adequacy. There's a certain point where like it's,
doesn't matter anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty minimal adjustments. But for pools, I just minus $25,000 across the board.
Exactly. Don't buy a house with a pool. They cost too much money.
Well, first of all, lenders, they want to see whatever you're appraising. If you have some kind of, that's what I was going to tell you about DADUs, is if you could find other DADU comps or whatever you're appraising, whatever unique part of the feature there is about a property, lenders, they really want to see that, how their market responds to that. So finding comparables like that, even if you have to travel far or go a little back in distance, is cool to do. So yeah, other properties with in-ground pools. I just did one. It was an indoor pool. I had looked all over for indoor pools, and it was like a awesome indoor pool. I had these 18-foot ceilings. It was high quality. Wow. That was tough. I found one with an in-ground pool in the same area, and you had to go so far. It was in south part of King County, and comps are all over the place. So it didn't make sense to do that. So, but in terms of making adjustments for pools, you can do some regression analysis in other paired sales data, or you can sometimes I just use a cost approach. It's not the best way to do it, but it's also kind of the easiest way, quick and dirty. Find out what it costs to build a pool, and then kind of figure out what the depreciated value cost over of that is. And I think people understand that it's also the maintenance of the pool.
Yes, for sure.
Kind of detracts from that feature. And it's not something, it's a pretty seasonal thing around here to have. Not that, I don't know what the percentage of homes have pools in the area, but I'm guessing it's pretty low. So not exactly, all things being the same, if you rolled up to a house that has a pool and doesn't have a pool, what more are you going to pay for that property? Unless you're like really in the market for a pool.
Right, exactly.
You just never know with the buyers, right?
That's true. They make their own game, that's for sure.
That's right.
That's for sure. Somebody brought up the question about VA appraisals. Does that differ for you? Is there something?
I'm not VA approved personally, but I talked to the appraiser who is one of the owners of the company, and he just said basically there's not much difference except that they do they're reviewed independently by the VA, underwritten by the VA. So not a whole lot of difference.
Okay. Got it. That's good.
From my understanding. Yeah.
Right. Pocket Hours is brought to you by Scout Real Estate. Hi, I'm Jennifer Nelson, owner at Scout Real Estate. I started this firm with the vision of doing things differently, with our focus on legendary service for our clients and creating a community of producing agents to spur each other to do higher quality work. If you are interested in learning more about how a small group of like-minded brokers have come together to have some fun while doing a lot of business, reach out to me, 206-227-7966, or email jennifer@scoutrealestate.com. I promise you this, fun is a high priority for me, but so is winning. So if you appreciate those two things, you might be interested in Scout. Looking forward to hearing from you. And it seems like, and I'm sure you've done this over your career, that you could be appraising on one day, a 2-bedroom, 1-bath in Renton, and the next day you could be appraising a $7 million home in Bellevue. Once it gets past a certain point, you're looking for comps, but there's got to be some properties, especially in Bellevue or other neighborhoods, even Seattle, that are hard to find comps for because they're so customized. They're expensive because they put a lot of money into them, but there aren't a lot of homes that have also done the same thing. So what do you do with that that house?
Super high end stuff.
Yeah.
I give it back to one of the owners.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
That's a joke. It's a challenge, right? Mm-hmm. So just like everything, there's a process to appraising. First of all, looking for comparable sales, and then also reaching out to agents and seeing what were they thinking, kind of starting there. It's kind of hard to say without actually having a property in hand, right. But I don't do a whole lot of like high-end luxury stuff. Most of the stuff is below $3 million. But to be honest with you, I haven't had much of an issue with it. So I've found plenty of comps, but I don't know, maybe other appraisers can speak to that. Maybe they're more in that niche to do super high-end stuff in Medina and Mercer Island. But even then, there's good stuff out there in Clyde Hill, and there's go to competing neighborhoods. And if you're doing waterfront, I've done plenty of waterfront properties where I go at stuff in Fauntleroy. I used that comp from Vashon Island once, to traveling. And it's also helpful to reach out to the lender. I know things have changed a lot since the HVCC. And then so we have appraisal management companies that we have to go through. And so since we're on AMCs, I will say there's one that I like. It's called Arrives. And they're awesome to work with. They're just easy to talk to, and they get through to the clients and lenders really well. Actually having good communication with the lenders and saying, hey, I need to get further information. Can I use these comps and stuff like that? And a lot of times depending on the AMC or the lender, they'll get back to you pretty quickly. Any issues you have, you got to just let everyone know.
Communicate about it. Yeah,
communicate, and not like the thing I think that you were alluding to earlier is like where I reached out to you and here's where we're at. It's like I've learned not to have surprises. People don't like that. So, so just give them cushion the blows. Like here's where I'm at. Here's where this is going, and talk to the people that order in the appraisal, in my front office. And we have a great office staff at Pacific Heritage Appraisal, and it's a great company I work for. I've been working for 25 years. They're great.
That's good. For listeners that are on this call that were not a part of sort of the boom and the bust for real estate that happened for us, what Andrew's referring to is just back in the day, before that happened, essentially a lender could speak directly to an appraiser. And as a result of that, and because of sort of the lending fraud that was going on, there were appraisers that were bought essentially by lenders to say, here's the value we need this to be, make it happen. And they did. And so that kind of went on amongst many other things that caused that crash to happen. And so now in place to help prevent that is that lenders have no direct communication with the appraiser. They don't know who it is. They hire a management company. That company then sends out one of their appraisers. So, the lender, like my lender, Mitzi, might know that Pacific Heritage is the company that is being hired to do the appraisal, but she'll have no idea who's doing that. So we are the people that get to talk to you. They don't.
Exactly. So that's exactly right. We do get on rosters. So they have the process where we apply for that and they interview for that. And so they get to know certain appraisers that are on there. They know exactly the appraiser who's just getting the appraisal. They can't say, hey, I want Jim or Andrew or whatever to get this appraisal, which they could. They'd have I want this specific appraiser.
Right. So. And I just want to clarify one other thing too, just for the listeners, and I'd love to hear your question. But another clarification is, it sounds like if you are representing a seller in a home that has had a bunch of work done,
it's great that you're marketing that, right, and showing that, but a list sometimes in the home, or being able to get that information to you to say, all new electrical, all new plumbing, new roof, new sewer line, new whatever. Here's the upgrades. Here's what we spent on it. They spent on it.
Oh yeah.
That kind of stuff probably helps, especially if you're doing a cost approach to say, here's $100,000 kitchen remodel. Okay.
Right.
That does
Well,
help.
there's also,
Okay.
also too, well, most importantly is like not just the cost approach that's cool and it
Yeah.
kind of affects the depreciation of the property.
Yeah.
And that most importantly is when I'm comparing it to the market, if I know you've put in $200,000 into the property, especially in the last year, like when were the updates done? What do they do? When they do them? How much money? And I just
Okay.
put that in the report, and then I can make
Okay.
it. It helps me with the adjustments
Yep.
for
Okay.
other properties that may or may have not done similar work.
Okay. That's great. Ooh, this is fun. Okay. So what's the question you have for realtors that I can speak on their behalf?
When a sale goes through,
Mm-hmm.
because I've had other like agents reach out and say, "Hey, I need to. I'll pass your information on to this different lender or whatever." And basically, how do you guys do that? Do you guys actually have companies that you push for certain deals, or how does that work exactly?
Yeah. So, but for me, at least, and I think can speak for others, that couple different things. One, I'll say to my lender, Mitzi, that I just referred to, I had a great experience with Andrew. He's with Pacific Heritage. So if it comes up that you're picking a company, Pacific Heritage would be the one I'd love for you to pick, because,
Yeah.
right, it could possibly be Andrew or someone like him if he's representative of sort of their way and style of working.
Yeah.
We also have a fair amount of people that come to us that just say, we need a good appraiser. We're going through a divorce. We're not sure we're going to sell, right? We have this piece of property, whatever the case may be. They just want it appraised first before they make that decision. And so being able to have someone that we trust to hand that work off to.
I have gotten a lot work that way, private appraisals through different agents that it's like, hey, so-and-so recommended you, and like, oh, okay. And it's someone I obviously did an appraisal for or something. So I was just curious, like how much actual power you guys have to be able to do that. So yeah.
Right. That begs another question for me. There have been times in my career that an appraisal has come in where I've thought, oh, that's just not very good work. To be honest, and it's way off. And it used to be, and maybe you can remember this too, that I might sell a property in West Seattle and I have someone in Des Moines or Puyallup or even Eastern Washington coming in to do that appraisal. So that's pretty hard for me. First off, that's changed a lot over the years, thankfully, that they try to get, specific appraisers that know the area, know the market better. But have you had an opportunity in your career where you've done an appraisal and had the agent sort of say, you missed the mark, or anybody come back?
Oh yeah.
Okay. A lot of those.
I'm not perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
And does that cause you to adjust, and kind of how do you deal with that?
So there's a process to that. It's called a reconsideration of value, or an ROV. And a lot of times you just go through the lender or the client and say, hey, appraiser, missed these comps, or I don't like this about the appraisal, or this on the subject, he missed, I don't know, the measurements off, or whatever the case may be. And then they just kind of, it's a formal, it's all documented, and then it gets sent to us. And then we take a look at that, and we have an opportunity to revise the report based on information. And sometimes the comps you guys send me, like they'll send comps like, hey, these ones you think are better comps than the appraiser used. And I'll take a look at them, and either I agree with that or I don't. So that's usually, like, a lot of it comes through is mostly people are upset about the value and the comp selection. And sometimes I love you guys. You guys are great. Sometimes though, your comps that you send over aren't really great, so we have to go like, okay, these are not comparable. And here's why I didn't use this one. And I saw this one, but at XYZ, this one has a great view, or this one is a new construction house and we're a 90s built home with some updating, or whatever reason. And there's other times where I go, yeah, okay, this one's a really good comp, right? I missed this or whatever. I'm not married to my appraisals. It's like, if I screw up, I got no problem making changes and adjusting the value, So that's kind of the process that we go through. But it's not like you can't, it's like, hey, Andrew, you screwed this up and I need you to change this. So it has to go, there's a chain of command that goes through, and it's all good.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
Yeah.
Because I've encountered different for whatever reason.
I've,
Yeah.
I've heard some stories. I've heard stories of appraisers.
Yeah.
I'm like, geez, man, it's
Let it go. Don't die on this hill. Not worth
lighten
it.
up.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. And just for our listeners again, especially for newbies in the industry, appraised value and market value are two different things. Sometimes they match and sometimes they don't. And so
sure.
just to be clear, Andrew knows this, but I'm saying this for the listeners, is that somebody might be willing in the market to pay X amount of dollars for a house, but Andrew's job, he's being hired right by a lender to say, if that person defaults, what do we think the next buyer would be willing to pay, and how are we covering our butts in making sure we don't default on the people that are loaning us money to loan you money. So we get confused about that when we're talking to our clients, is to say, they might say to us, well, we just got an appraisal and here's the amount. And it might even be higher sometimes if they're doing a refinance than we think the market would bear for that in that current market, right? So being able to distinguish those two is pretty important. So
Oh yeah, absolutely.
yeah. Do you see any, kind of as we kind of wrap up, and thank you again, but do you see any trends about, I don't know if there are trends in appraisals, but anything you want to add to the conversation?
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on. I know mortgages are down. And so the volume of orders are down too. And that comes from just the industry. It comes down to turn times, right? Like there's more appraisal waivers, and then there's hybrid appraisals that have come up because there's more limited appraisals, and there's also different tech industries getting into the market as well, who are not appraisers. So there's all these little, just from an appraiser standpoint, it's like there's kind of just less work to do, unfortunately. And in the mortgage industry, there's other things you get into, and like obviously tax estate stuff and private appraisals and a bunch of other things you can get into to expand your business. But in terms of what we do, mostly the single family market and mortgages. So there's a push for kind of more specialization, probably what the industry's running into. And so there'll be, instead of doing a whole appraisal from A to Z, you'll be doing parts of appraisal. Maybe you'll do inspections. You'll be doing part of the write-up process. You'll be doing market analysis or data. There's also third-party companies that do appraisal input. I use Data Master. There's Spark. There's Titan Analytics. There's all kinds of different things you can do to throw into your report. So I don't know if that's answering your question or not, but I think there's a lot of change that's always taken place in appraising since I've started. The changes to USPAP and all that kind of stuff, and how we go about really providing a good quality report as fast as we can. Because the lender can't do certain things until they get the report back and they got that value, then they can. So that's always a thing, right?
I would add too that we've both been at this long enough to be able to, I think, say this, and it might make me sound like an old realtor, but I'm going to take that risk anyway. And that's to say, there are so many things that have come up just even in my 20-year tenure of, we can value your home. You can jump online right now and Redfin will tell you what, this, and Zillow, and there's probably a dozen more. But the difference between the value of an actual person walking into a house, driving a neighborhood, looking at it with their very human eyes, and the report that comes back and the detail of that, the research that goes into that report, just like it goes into when we value a home to list it. There's discount firms everywhere that'll tell you this and that and the other. We can throw your home on the market in a minute, but are they getting that price right? And that takes time, and it takes expertise, and it takes experience. And so it does. I just continue to value that above all these other fast solutions. So
that's a lot of challenges out there for everyone in the real estate industry, for sure. And for us, especially the Redfin and the Zillows out there. Sometimes I got to say they're pretty accurate, and sometimes they're like just way off. It's like,
exactly.
When do you know when that is, right? So it's
true. We joke that the letter A in Zillow stands for accuracy. So we like that one. They actually have in small print right on their site, if you've noticed, very small print, that they are 25% either high or low. And when you're talking about an $800,000 house, that's a whole lot of money that they're giving themselves that leeway to swing to kind of cover their bases. So again, do your work and you'll stand out just by having a better comprehensive report. Andrew, it's been so good to have you on the call and talk to you. And thank you for sharing what you know. This has been good for me. And I know realtors will appreciate getting to this information. So
can I say one more thing?
Yeah, for sure.
For real estate agents, it's small. And I know MLS isn't written for us, or it's not for us appraisers, but the concessions, if you guys could just put those concessions report, either yes or no. And if it's yes, then if you could put those in there. I know there's a way you can click on the link and find those out. That's just a small thing you guys could do to speed up the process.
Okay.
We were supposed to report those as well. So
good. No, that's great. I'll make a note of that on the notes here for the show. Thank you again. Appreciate it very much. And hopefully you'll be appraising more of my houses. That'd be fun to work with you again. So
yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for listening into Pocket Hours. I hope this has been interesting, fun, made you laugh, made you think, spurred you on to do and implement some new things in your business. I appreciate your time and hope this has been a good use of it, period. Now, go be the agent you would hire.